There's a couple of things we're going to talk about today that are going to come out of lots of different places in the Bible. And so I won't necessarily give you all of the references, but you'll be familiar with what we're going to talk about. For me, when we begin to talk about multiplication, it's the goal of every Jesus movement in the world, that we would get to multiplication and to, if we wanted to get exponential, that would be an amazing thing. Those things have happened over time where we've seen God do something that we knew we couldn't do. And when we knew something that we can't do, that's a big deal. So I just want to kind of walk through two little pieces real quick. The most important, once you've come to a relationship with Jesus, the most important thing that is the number one big trigger for movement is, I believe that God is actually leading me. We have people sitting in pews all over the country, and they're listening, and they're hearing, and they're absorbing some of it, and they're thinking about some of it. And the reality is, when something stirs inside of you and you know it's bigger than you, that is the big moment where God's saying, hey, I can actually, so the first part is He's leading you or He's talking to you. The second part is He's not just leading you and talking to you, He's going to use you. So multiplication is on the front end of I hear God's voice, I do what God says. It's that rhythm. So that rhythm that we're trying to get into people's hearts, if we're sitting in front of thousands of people and telling them we want this to get into your heart, it doesn't just jump into your heart. But when God steps into a room and He says, hey, this is what we're going to do today, I'm going to actually show you what I designed you to be and designed you to do, and I'll help you get better at it all the way till you see me face to face. Those big 5 words, I will see His face, you will see His face one day. And when you see His face, you'll say, thank you for leading me. Thank you for using me. Thank you for leading me. Thank you for using me. If we could get that into the collective psyche of all of the people that come to all of the churches that all of us have been to, and we can see that happen, that's the beginning of movement. Now, multiplication is a result of movement. Now, movement is not what we often call movement. I need to call movement out. Okay. So let's call movement out. Movement isn't like, hey, we had 300 people last week and 400 showed up. That is not movement. Movement is hearing the voice of God and taking that step. That's what it is. It starts small. It incrementally moves to exponential over time. Now, God can do whatever He wants miraculously at any moment. So it could be not just over time, it could be actually bam. And we love that when that happens, when it's, And the first student ministry, I was the worst. I need to write apologies to the youth pastors, to the youth that I pastored. I totally needed to. I had no idea what I was doing. We took these guys, and I knew they were rough. It was a church that nobody could get a youth pastor, and that's the only reason that I ever got in ministry is because this church couldn't get a youth pastor, and they thought, well, we'll give this guy a shot. And so he gave this guy a shot, and we went to a camp, and they all brought weed. And they all had, intentions in the woods with someone of, their attraction. And you hear how hard we have to do that now, So the reality is something happened in a session where there was this guy that just had a moment, and he said, hey, I don't have any awareness of what's going on here, but go get all of your weed and go put it in the fire. And he didn't know that, but he assumed that based on what he was seeing. And so that happened, and there was a different oxygen. Have you ever been in the room when the oxygen changes because God walks in and does something that you didn't anticipate? And so we love BAM, but I'm telling you, movement and multiplication is a lot better. It's a lot better. So if we wanted to start, I know the verses, so I'll just go ahead and let's start there. And let's just ask the Lord to give us like a hearing moment today. Okay. So Jesus, what we do in these moments may not stir a movement. They may not cause multiplication to take place. It may not be exponential. It may not look that way. But when we see your face and you tell us to turn around and look, you will be shocked at the people that have been impacted by your influence. And so, Jesus, we want to make every ounce of that as full as we possibly can. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so Jesus, God, Holy Spirit got together and they decided we cannot let the first chapter of the Bible not have the word multiply in it. It has got to be there. I just know it belongs here. Genesis 1:27-29. This is where Jesus said, hey, you're created in the Imago Dei, and as the Imago Dei, we are like God. We can have relationship with Him. We're unique in the universe because of that. And He said, I want you to be fruitful and multiply. Now, He showed the world what it looked like in the Bible by saying, hey, on this day, it was good. On this day, it was good. On this day, it was good. There was work involved. Fourth day, it was good. Fifth day, it was good. Sixth day, it was very good because a man found a woman, right? And it's a good thing for a man to have a woman. It really is. Settles things down. It's a really beautiful, beautiful experience. But when He said, let's be fruitful and multiply, just like 2 chapters over, we're screwing everything up. Like we're falling into a situation where, hey, now perfection has met ashes. And so beauty and ashes are taking place. Hey, good to see you. And in this concept of what's happening, you would think that ruins everything. But actually, it makes everything better. Because in the light of not having to perform well, we humans think if we perform well for God, He'll love us more. That is not how it works. So in the fall, with us standing in a space of really trying to say, I know that I just screwed up. And if Adam and Eve knew how bad they screwed up, like it was all of us too. And if you were there, it would have been you too. You would have done the same thing. Because there's something about grace that makes the whole thing of the Bible work. And so what we have to do is we have to come to those moments and we go, okay, things got so bad so quick, there was a flood, right? So the flood came, and as the flood came, it just messed everything up except for, just Noah and, a bunch of animals and his family. And he probably would rather not have had his family than the animals on the ark. And so all of that was going, and here's what happened. Instead of saying, y'all messed everything up, and we're in that Genesis 6-7 kind of landing spot, and what we're running through in our minds, in our heads is, gosh, everything is messed up. Everything is messed up. Everything is messed up. But in the middle of the mess up, for the rebuild that's coming, what God did, He didn't say, you know what, at the beginning, chapter 1, I was so wrong about this multiply thing. Like I totally missed it. Like I shouldn't have put it in there. I wish I can't take it out now because I put it in. Apparently, if I put it in, it's got to stay there. But but ultimately, here's what happened. God didn't say, I messed that up. What God said is He actually doubled down on be fruitful and multiply. He doubled down on both of those. And He said twice, I think He had His daddy voice on. I think His daddy voice was working. And so we got to that place and we got to that space after multiplication had happened biologically. And now we're in a new space and it's a new world. And we're stepping into that. Churches need to walk through that part of the narrative regularly because we repeat it over and over and over again. Like that just happens over and over again. It's part of the movement. The messiness of the movement is part of the movement. and it's part of the multiplication. So if you guys have been around, I'll try to find multiple colored things that I can put up there on the board. But if you've been to exponential, this is a construct that is just called level 5 thinking, and it helps us have a picture of what it looks like to do this. Now, I'm gonna give you a little mathematician kind of work right here. So if this is just a very simple concept of having a quadrant up here, if it's going this way, what do you think that means, like mathematically? This is subtraction or declining. A straight line, what would that mean, like in church world, church language? Plateau. There you go. What's this mean? Addition. So addition, but not just addition. This is the major goal of the church in Western world. Not everywhere, because if we're doing this, it's all good. But if we say, this is subtraction, this is plateau, this is addition. Okay, addition is not a bad thing. Bad addition would be a bad thing, but there's good addition, and you have to start with good addition because you can't multiply until you can add. So if you just kind of keep that in mind, this is reproduction, and this is multiplication. Okay, so does that make sense? All 5 of these things in mathematics world. So if some of y'all were mathematic, that was just for you. Okay, so you can see where that runs, and ultimately what we're trying to do now is we're trying to get into a construct. And when we get in the construct, I want you to feel free to break in and say, wait a minute. Let's talk about this. But so here's what we've got, and I'll try to keep this simple. So level 1 in church in North America, the average church is somewhere between 89, 0 to 89. Right. So the average church in America is there. They struggle. Some of them are church plants. Some of them have been around for a while. Some of them have gotten really big, and then they've done the plateau, and then they slid down the slide. And so in this conception, what we want to do is to say this is probably a bivocational pastor, a single pastor, on his own. He's got roughly 89 people. And we call that subtraction. Now, it's not because of numbers. It's because anything that you start, you have to be really bad at it before you get really good at it, and it takes time, right? So, is it okay to be a church that doesn't know how to do things as well as other churches? Yes, that's a natural thing. Okay, so when we move over to level 2, we'll come back to that in just a minute, but when we move over to level 3, what we're doing here is this looks like which one of these things down here? So level 3, so this is what we would call addition, and that's a good thing. And if you want to know, which you probably don't really care, but 86% of churches in America are here. Scary, right? That's scary. Okay, so when we move over to, I always like this one because it's just fun. Okay, so when we get to level 2, what we're looking at here is, so now this church has grown a little bit, and it's got a little more money, and actually at level 2, what they're doing is they're beginning to say, okay, we actually can pay our bills. Okay? That's what we can do. We can pay our bills now. We may not have margin, but we can pay our bills, and that's a really good thing. So we love that. But what would happen if you moved over to this place, and then you got here, and then somebody stole that pastor? What's going to happen again? We're probably going to go back this way, right? So there are lots of things that go back and forth. And what we want you to know is there's no hierarchy on any of these. We want churches with 89 people. We want churches with 12 people. We want churches with thousands of people. We want churches of all size, right? So we're inside this world and we're looking at that. And so when we call this subtraction and we call this addition, that helps us make sense out of the two. So what would 2 be if subtraction and addition are on either side? What goes here? What would sound reasonable to go there? Yeah. So what I would want to say about it is that it's growing. I want to say that. And not only is it growing, but it's struggling and growing at the same time, and it doesn't know whether it's going to get to 3, and it doesn't know whether it's going to go back to 1. So it just doesn't know. So it's here. So one search committee can come like move things back on this deal, right? So just one search committee can move that. So when we move over to addition. We want to quantify what's happening here. This could be, let's just use 100 to infinity. Okay, well, that's the wrong way in it. That's just 8. Okay. All right. So let's do infinity. So this is 100 to infinity. Now, if you have infinity people in your church, you're God. So that's the way that it works. But if thankfully none of us have this, but 100 to here is most people, when we get to this point, they'll say, well, that's my goal, because we want to have the infinity church. We want to have the concept of an infinity church. Everybody in our community, whatever that happens to be, and that's okay. But what happens is most churches that get stagnant, they get stagnant right here in this third level. And the third level is a pretty significant deal. We're going to push this back to make it look a little better. We're going to go here and we're going to say, hey, roughly 10 churches in America, 14% of churches in America are right there. It's getting better. It was worse for a while, and it's getting better. And so if you're here and we're looking at addition and we're here and we're not stuck, but we're growing. And so what we're going to come to a really good word for that in just a minute, but we'll get to 4. So let's go to 4. Level 4. So level 4 is what happens when you outgrow level 3. Okay, so you're in a church and you have level 3 and your church gets really full, and then you say, you know what? Somebody comes up with a great idea. Let's have 2 services. We could what we could do here is we could have two services. So we're not just adding people, but we're adding services. And when we add services, that adds people. Okay, so addition is part of the journey. It's part of what we're going for. And so when you get to 4, this is like a different thing. Okay, so you could have multiple services and you could have multiple venues. And then you could have multiple churches so that we can get the same message in lots of different places. All of those things can happen simultaneously, and it's all addition. It looks like multiplication. Does this make sense? Like if you're in a huge, big old church and you go 2 services, 3 services every time, and say, "Hey, we got to go for 4 now," and everybody's, "Whoa! It's amazing. It's incredible. It's good." All right. So when we go through addition and we get here, like now, all of a sudden, we're looking at reproduction. And reproduction is a good word. Like when you disciple somebody and they can disciple somebody, That's reproduction. If you do that on a one-on-one basis. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and write this down. The things that I really love to model on this is we can make disciples. Excuse me. That's a really good audio right there. So we can do disciples, we can do groups, and we can do churches. And we can plant them, we can multi-site them. There's all kinds of ways, and we can microsite. We can do 3 people as church. We can all those things can happen. They're happening all over the world. Those are good things. But over here in our context, we're kind of really playing right here. These are the things that we're looking at. So when we're pushing on these buckets, it's a really important thing. Now. What we're going to do over here is we're going to come into this little circle and we're going to say 6% of churches in America are in reproduction. So do some math. Okay. 80 plus 14 plus 6 equals? It's 100. It's 100%. 100%. Now, it's not totally 100% because there's a 99 point, decimal that comes after that. And there are churches that are in multiplication. So when we come over and we look at this concept of saying, okay, multiplication, what does it look like? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do just simple things. Okay, so again, math. I'm sorry, for some of you, and some of you, I'm not sorry about it. Okay, so 1 plus 1 equals. 2. All right, good. That was good. I was worried for just a second. Georgia, I went to school in Georgia, so I might not be too good with this stuff. Okay, but 1 times 1 equals
1.
Okay, so what does that tell you?
You have to start with addition.
Yeah, you have to start with addition, number 1. And if you come back there, sometimes you pay a price for multiplication. Both of those things are happening. Does that make sense? Okay, so let me give you a real life example. In the church that I'm serving in, we had a student ministry where the youth pastor had 1,000 people in the room every Wednesday night. Crazy. 600 middle school kids, 250 adults, 250 high school kids helping the adults disciple the kids, because it was a discipleship program with teaching, worship, and then everybody go outside and when people would drive by, they would just see nothing but kids strewn all along. And so the whole community is like, maybe our kid needs to go to that church. They can see it on that section of the grass. It's just absolutely perfect. Good to see you, John. And so we got there and we had a level 3 mentality, but we had an opportunity to help a church. And actually they said, hey, we actually just want you to come have our church. We just give it to you. And so we had to find, what do you have to find if you're gonna plant a new church or replant a church? You gotta have a pastor, right? So we asked the youth pastor that has 1,000 kids on the lawn every Wednesday night. Well, not only kids. We have to remind you, it's adults and high school students helping. So I started getting phone calls as the XP, and they said, hey, I've been waiting for my child to be in Randy's student ministry for 11 years. I have been here for 11 years for Randy to be the student pastor of my son, and you're moving him 8 miles away. And I said, that's easy. So it's an easy solve. Go with him. just go with him. He's going to have a great student ministry wherever he goes. He's right beside a high school. Perfect for him. Great. Incredible. So for some reason, the parent didn't believe that. That wasn't good news. That wasn't good news to them. So sometimes you actually go backwards to go forward And sometimes you have to use addition to get to multiplication, and it's deficient. Does that make sense? All right. So let's keep going. What happens though if we keep doing this? 2 plus 2 equals. Y'all are in Texas, so y'all do that math better than I do. That's great. Okay. And then if you come over here and you do this, what's the reality? It's 4. All right, so multiplication doesn't work. That's what happens. The senior pastor of every church I've been in is like, no, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I said, well, it doesn't. But if I keep drawing numbers on this page right here, and we get to cycle 3 of what's going on, 3 plus 3 equals 6, and then we get over here and we go 3 times 3 equals 9. You got to wait a while to let multiplication kind of sift into, and it's God's intentionality. God didn't say, be fruitful and add. He said, be fruitful and multiply. And so we're really good at the adding stuff though. Like we're so good at adding stuff. So I'm going to say some words. I'm not going to write them down because I don't want anybody to blame me for anything and have a picture. So we can do production in our sleep. We can do it in our sleep. And that's an addition method. Okay, so it's great to have a great communicator at the front of the stage, and it's great to have hundreds of people or thousands of people or 12 people just around the word. That's all good. That's all beautiful. It's wonderful. The problem is we've so bought into that one tactic that now we don't know how to go back and grab 12 and say, come with me. We have almost completely forgotten to do that. And so our goal isn't to say, this is the argument that most people have. It's, production bad, discipling good. No, production's good. Goes over the top a lot. I really wish a lot of pastors weren't on social media as much as they are, because it's really, in some places, really not done well, and kind of quirky. So if we're here and we're saying, hey, in order for us, I got to drop that one before I get over here because I'm not going to buy them a new board. So when we do this, the easiest way to do it is to say, hey, let's figure out how to make some disciples. Let's find the people who have leadership capacity and let's pour into them maybe just a couple hours a week. Let's just pour into them a couple hours a week, and let's figure out how we can get more leaders, because when you get, dang it, I did it again. All right, where's there's another color somewhere, but I don't know where it is. So I'm just going to use blue. So what happens is disciples move to leaders when leaders make disciples. I love a great worship event. I did those for 9 years at Georgia Baptist Convention and loved it. Started feeling plastic about year 6 and year 7 and year 8, and seeing the same kids getting baptized every year, and seeing all those things happen. It's still good. It's beautiful. But the reality is, when I'm gone, and if I'm leading people, if I die and I don't leave lots of leaders behind me, the next generation it's going to be a leaderless generation. We have to be able to say, there's a few people we need to give some specific time to. And you know what they called Jesus ministry? There's a point where he was going to crowds a lot. He's going to crowds a lot. He's going to crowds a lot. All of a sudden, he's over, on the other side of the river with his 12 alone. He did that every day with his Father, but I love this too, because Jesus lived in a way that every day he would wake up before anyone else and pray to his heavenly Father, and then his disciples had to get up and go find Jesus. It's just a really cool, kind of a deal. So when he left that mountain and he went down and he fed all of the people, And there were how many baskets left over? Don't remember? 12 baskets, so that each disciple could pick up one and go, gosh, we had a BAM. We had a BAM. And this might be a movement. And his movement was, you know what, now we've got to pull away and I've got to tell you everything. And if you go to the mustard seed moment, the mustard seed moment is, hey, smallest seed of all, very potent, creates culture that becomes it's a huge tree that can take culture inside of it. Birds live in it. It's amazing. It's incredible. And so we love that picture of thousands of people, coming to Jesus. And Jesus, I really believe, was trying to draw the attention to Genesis 1:27 through 29. Is, hey, what did we start with? A few fish and loaves. And what did you get back? There's something unique. There's something movemental that's happening. And he demonstrated it most when he took his 12 and said, you know what, we're going to get away from the crowds. And if you look at the bottom of the mustard seed passage, what you're going to see is Jesus always taught with a parable, and some couldn't understand. But when he was alone with the 12, he told everything to them. There's some people you just take deeper. Does that make sense? So when you're discipling, the best way to implement multiplication into your church is by making disciples. When you make disciples, that turns somebody into a leader, and that leader can lead other people. And if you lead them well, and you have like a good discipleship pathway that really gives them I'll just define discipleship pathway. The habits of Jesus would be a great discipleship pathway. If you watch what he did, like over and over and over again, he had habits and rhythms. And if you find those habits and rhythms, you go, hey, we need to make this into a discipleship pathway that's contextual to our church and our people and our community. And there's a lot of tools you can get with that. So if you create groups, you know what happens? Now it's not just one of us helping 4 people. Now we got, 4 people finding 16 people to be able to step in deeper. If you did this, okay, so I'm OCD when I start doing research. And so when I start doing research and I do OCD, it would take 14 years for us to disciple everyone in the world in 14 years. If all of us took 4 and all of them took 14 years. It might have boosted up since, maybe there's 7 billion people now, but this is a little ways back. But if you're looking at the mountain and you're looking at Jesus and his 12 starting the day and leaving to go hear everything else, what happened in the middle was the apparent miracle. The reality is you're here now, not because of the thousands that he fed, but the 12 that he led. You're here. The gospel got this far because some people always carried the discipling message all the way. And that's what Jesus was trying to do. Because he just doesn't want groups. Listen, classroom is good. It's a good venue for certain types of spiritual encouragement. It's not a bad thing. It's not a production thing. We're not in competition. We need both of those things. But the pressure point that we have to come to really get to genuine multiplication is that there's somebody who I poured into who will pour into somebody who will pour into somebody who will pour into somebody. And when you do this with groups and you do it well, he finds his 4 over here, and now you got 16 instead of just 4 or just 1. And if you keep doing this and you do it consistently, and if you do it with the discipleship pathway, you end up getting a culture and a language along with it. Because you're teaching the same things to the same people, not like in a, trying to think what the right word would be. We're not trying to put people into a cult. We're trying to get people to have the habits of Jesus. That's what we're trying to do. So when you do groups, though, and let's say these guys get pretty proficient at what they're doing, and we'll talk about fourth generation in just a minute. But if these 16, all take 4, I can't do the math because I'm from Georgia. So 16 times 4 is what?
64.
64. All right. So now we're outside of my capacity now. My wife does our checkbook, so I hope y'all be comforted by that. And so look, watch. How close is that to that? What if we planted churches that were third generation disciples that did that again. It's really hard to multiply a church that's got 15,000 people in it. All they can do is come. So the reality of what we're trying to do is saying, hey, the pathway for Jesus was, I'm going to give the best stuff. 50% of his time in the Gospels was him and the 12. So what was his primary? And he had groups of people, and he was the signature best church planner capture in the world. Like all that he did was really amazing. So let's start looking over here. Let's just go to multiplication. And now that we're at multiplication, let's talk about some stuff. Okay. Did this happen in your church this week? No. Well, I mean, we didn't go from 1 to 5. That's going to take time. It's going to take some journey. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at these pieces. And as we look at these pieces, we're going to start saying, gosh, so what really is the difference between what's happening here? So in subtraction, what you get here is the mantra of the church is, please stay, please don't go, please don't go, please don't go. I'm begging you, don't go. Please don't go. It's kind of like the jilted, boyfriend, kind of conversation, like, hey, don't leave, pastor, please don't leave. And the pastor's saying to all of them, hey, please don't leave, please don't leave. All that stuff is real there. Okay. So when you move from subtraction, and this is kind of like a mentality, this starts to be like, this is who we are. Just please stay, please stay. We got a guy that plays the juice harp, with some, parchment paper, but eventually we're going to have a worship leader, I promise. Okay, so it's that it's that kind of conversation. Okay, in addition, we move from please stay to please come. Yeah, so please come. Please come. So what we're doing is we're in a building and we're saying, please come, please come, please come. Brand new research in that little page right over here. I'll just read it straight out to you. 83% of churches that are growing are the churches that are going. So that tells you the churches that are growing, they're going somewhere. They're doing something. They're consistently pressing into things. Okay, so now if you have please stay here and you have please come here, what are they asking you to do here? Please go. Please go. And in what context? Like, what are they saying please go to?
Start another church.
Yeah.
Go on mission.
Yeah.
Third generation disciples go create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is beautiful. I have amazing children. I love my kids. I wish they're better than me. I hate that. I hate that about me, but they're better than me and fries me a little bit. Okay. So what we've got here is, I'll go ahead and just tell you that, all of my children are taller than me. and my wife is just slightly taller than me, so we'll give her some hair there, and we'll have that's her. And so we have Seth, Nate, Drew, and Mary Beth. Now, here's the big question. Have I multiplied?
Yes.
No.
Okay, so there's dissension in the room. I can feel the tension, coming. Okay, so if you're thinking about mathematics and we're trying to do it in a pure way, there were 2 of us, and so now there are 4 of them, so that makes 6 of us. And I could put my dog over here because he's like the best dog in the history of the universe, and he should be there. He lost use of his legs for about 6 days, and we thought we were going to have to put him down, and we didn't. So it was sweet that we didn't have to do that. So here, why would this be multiplication? It's because 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, but 2 plus 2 is 4, right? So when you're looking at this, you got to figure this out. You got to go, what's the real deal? Well, Seth has Ollie and Georgia. Now have I multiplied? Why? How did we multiply? What's different? Because this is 8 now. So we 4 times multiplied, So that's what it looks like. Why is this multiplication and this is not multiplication?
It's the descendant creating.
Yeah, now we're doing generational work, right? This is Gen 1, this is Gen 2, this is Gen 3. So I can, by God's providence, we had 4 kids with all the fun ways that He allowed us to do that. And so we had all 4 of these kids, and we love all of them, but all we did at this level was add 4 kids to the world. Does that make sense? When we get to the 3rd generation and they're giving us kids, now we're at multiplication. The first person to the 3rd generation means you've multiplied. Okay, so now let's talk about 4th generation kind of quirk that goes with it. When you're discipling people and you get to the 4th generation, the movement is out of control at that point. Nobody can track the reality. So if you're doing this, like this is what should be intuitive to the church. Like this is where I get a little freaky. But
No,
that's right. It's right. Not that kind. Okay. Yeah. Sharpie. Oh, Savior. That's a Savior moment right there. Okay. So when we get here, when we're making disciples and we get here, what should happen at the individual level should happen at the group level, because we should be like carrying people into finding the leaders. Some people are, y'all know this, some people in your church are not saved, right? Okay, all right, just making sure that you knew that. Okay, because I was in a church where we had Muslim people that came to our church, and we had people that were like every diversity that you could possibly imagine. So the reality is that the whole reality here actually happens in groups, and the whole reality there causes churches. So I'll just give a couple quick metaphors that were real. We had a church in the other side of Atlanta. So we were up here and they were like over here, and they knew somebody at our church, and they said, "Hey, we need some help. Can y'all come help us?" And we gave them a pastor for a while, and then we did missional communities in their basement together. And all those people started going to that basement, and they gave us their property, 8.5 acres, 500 seats, because they saw kids in their church again. They saw the multi-generational reality of kids back then. This is why we built this church. We lost our way. And now if you went there today, like you'd have to see 3 services going, because that's all they can do. So there's a reality that we have to tap into, that it's not just for disciples. It's disciples create leaders who lead groups. And you can take the Greek method and the Hebrew method and you put them side by side. The Greek method gets information out fast, quick. Podcasting is just a new way of saying, hey, I have a congregation out there and they need to hear this stuff and they want to hear this stuff, so they listen to it. All of that's good, right? But the reality of what we do in church, it's, I just have to say this number, 95% of most of income in church goes to buildings, personnel, and production. So, that whole organic thing that's happening right here doesn't actually need money. Does that make sense? So what's the currency? Okay. The currency's time. Right? So if you're Greek, it's a classroom model. It's passive learning, listening, and the other piece of it is we don't really have a level of engagement to know if it's making a difference. If in certain sizes, that kind of thing. So time is the issue. So when you look at time, the other piece of research is somewhere between 80% of the time of the church is on attractional things. And so I'm okay with that. I'm not griping about it. But man, what if we could give that 20%, to some of these 3 things? We don't have to change church. All we have to do is change a few people, and then we can do both of them well simultaneously. Does that make sense? Because Jesus actually drew a crowd. Preached pretty dang well. Don't you think? Yeah, I think so. Saw miracles happen in the moment and saw the longevity of 2,000 plus years of discipling, like carrying all of these generations. Now, let's have some fun. How many of y'all have family reunions? Do you have family reunions? Okay, all right. Christmas, Thanksgiving, everybody gets together. How many people show up at the house that you're at when it's like Christmas gathering? How many people come?
15.
About 15 in your family? Yeah. It's too big for one house, right? Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. The last Christmas that we had with the 5th generation grandmother, she had 132 people in her house. And so it's not sexy, is it? Like the problem with multiplying is it's just not sexy at all. It's just over time doing the messy work with messy people and continuously understanding what he did. So if you want a little bit of fun to walk with this, and you want to do this in a little more scaled way, what we would say is the promised land journey, right? Okay, so we're in the promised land journey. So back here they're in what's the, I'm going to use red up there. So what's the country they're in the promised land journey? They're in Egypt, right? All right. Was Egypt good for Jewish people? No, it wasn't good for Jewish people. But the Egyptian people were afraid of them because they were multiplying. That was the language that was used. So they started really crunching down, hey, we're not going to give you straw. Hey, we're going to make you work longer. We're going to take the water away. We're going to do all that kind of stuff. And so this is a land of subtraction. Egypt is a land of subtraction. Okay. So what do? There's this whole Pharaoh thing that's afraid, and the plagues come, and all that stuff happens, and the showdown between Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner is like in full force, and they're like, hey, we're gonna let my people go. He loses his firstborn. He says, let my people go. And they finally said, okay, let's let my people go. That lasted about 20 minutes, and the Jewish people started going to the Promised Land. And so over here, this is the Red Sea, right? So they crossed the Red Sea, and God did an amazing BAM miracle by saying, hey, seems like the Jewish people just got out of the water when we just, doused everybody else out. They were gone. So the problem that they had was, and watch this, the problem that they had was the oppression of Egypt. Well, now they crossed a Red Sea, and where did they land? Like, what's the landing pad right here?
Wilderness.
Yeah, so you're in the wilderness, and while you're in the wilderness, there's problems in the wilderness, right? Okay, so everybody thinks this is the church that I wanted to get to. This is the ministry that I wanted to have. And I don't want anybody else to mess with any of it. So you're in the wilderness, but God has to miraculously provide for you day by day. You can't get food without God's dropping it on you. You can't get direction without the fire and the cloud. You can't get that. Okay, so what happens is 12 spies go this way, and they say, hey, everything the Bible says is like really true about over there. So we really need to get over there because the fruits is really big. The wells have already been dug. This is going to be awesome. This is going to be amazing. And so what happens is the 12 spies had some mathematical issues too. There were 10 that were jerks, and there were 2 that were right. Okay, so the 2 that were right said, "Let's go. God's going to handle this for us," and that didn't happen because the 10 scared them so bad. They said, "Hey, you guys are like giants eating grasshoppers." That's what they said. They'll kill us, and so they with fear they got everybody to do what they want except for Joshua and Caleb, and Joshua and Caleb said, "No, let's go take it," and they didn't take it. So here's what happened: 40 years in the wilderness was the price. I know of churches that have had 40 years of wilderness. I've unfortunately seen that. So 40 years, and here's the deal. Everybody under the age of 20 died in the wilderness. And they said it was roughly 87 people per day in that 40 years, on average, if it was every day was the same. Okay. So finally, when we get back into this story and the next generation has the opportunity to go, and there's a psalm that really lays that out really beautifully. But they crossed over the River Jordan, and they made it to what would we call this? Promised Land. You know what's cool about the Promised Land and what multiplication is? It's because all the stuff that you need to bless the whole world was in the Promised Land. All the water that you need, all the food that you need, all the rest that you need, all the ability that you have that God's given you. And they were ready to get over to the Promised Land. And when they got to the Promised Land, they had to fight for it. So even in multiplication, there's always a fight. Does this make sense? We try to take church without a fight. There's always a fight. Always a fight. So it's just different. So God is building our strength up in different ways in all of these levels. And some churches get to 5. They tell us now there's about maybe 30 or 40 in the country that are really like doing it this way. But surprisingly enough, they're more like parish model churches where, hey, we do one. We're in New York. We just got to go put another one at the next, transit station, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. Those kind of things are happening. Micro churches are doing it. And so when we're looking at this, what we want to say is, I just want our lives to count. I just want our lives to count. And if our lives count, it's going to have something to do with multiplication, and you won't know the impact that you made until you see Jesus' face, and then he says, yeah, but turn around. It wasn't just you, but look at what happened. Because the gospel moves to people through people. It doesn't really move people through programs. It doesn't move to people through magic. It moves because that still small voice that we talked about, that you hear, that God leads you, you can trust that. You can know when it's the enemy, and you can tell how he approaches you. If it's not, you know God's voice. That's the thing. And then he wants to use you. So as we look at this, what we want to do from a perspective of how do we apply it, don't go home and tell your church or your pastor that we're only a level 2 church. Don't do any of that. Please don't do that. You'll get me in trouble. You'll get in trouble. Everybody else will get in trouble. But just understand that God's put us in a place where he is enough for us in all 4 of these. And we sat in a room full of mega pastors and they said, wait a minute, Scott. There's nothing wrong with being a 3. It's absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with being a 3. Everybody has a personality. Every church has a personality. And but you're telling me 5 is better. No. We're just telling you 5 is very biblical. And you don't have to choose. You don't have to choose. There are level 1 churches doing amazing things. Can we agree to that? Level 2 churches doing amazing things. 3, 4, 5 doing amazing things. They're all doing amazing things. They're all doing stupid things too, because Genesis 3 is still there. Yeah. So yes, sir.
I got a question. Okay, so I'm really.
Hey, if you guys need to go, you can go ahead and go because it's right on time, and I know y'all want to get your food. But I'm happy to answer questions. Yeah, for sure.
I'm really intrigued by the 2 + 2 = 4, 2 × 2 = 4. What are some of the ways in the church world that you've seen, like what would be the examples of like this kind of presents itself, like you have a baptism and you really don't know if that's addition or multiplication until, I'm guessing, like the 3rd generation. But what would be some of those examples of things that maybe they can present, addition and multiplication can present the same?
Yeah.
You really don't know until.
Yeah. I think most of the time we don't get to see it. And then there are moments that you get, out of like those more mysterious passages that say, hey, the angels long to know these things, but they're so holy. We can't, we can't release some of that stuff. But what I think you're asking is if you recognize that this is good and this has the potential for bang, that's what we want to see. And so addition always leads to, it can always lead to multiplication, but it doesn't always. And sometimes God does it so slow that we wouldn't recognize it. So for example, we discipled 3,000 people in a span of about 2.5 years. We just said, we're going to go after this as hard as we can. And we want to see what happens. Well, what happened was people started saying, I feel like God is leading me too. Now, so that's a big word. Okay. So that when somebody says that, God is leading me too, because they're not looking at you as the pastor and saying, Pastor, would it be okay if I? Does that make sense? We have, listen, gosh, I want to almost turn this off. We have almost stood between God and his people as leaders because we love our people so much and we want the very best for them. But God actually wants better for them than you want for them. And so we've got to be careful. Like, I want to care for people really, really well. And I also want to empower and release them really, really well. And it's, so we did that in that season where we discipled across like maybe 4 or 5 campuses. We get together for this group thing that we would do. And there was a group of ladies that said, hey, I want to have, there's 13 elementary schools within 10 miles of our radius. I would love to do after school care with that. And she put it on a board like this, and she put it on the wall. And if there's anybody else that wants to do that, go write your name on the board, give me a phone number, and we'll get it done. Within 2 weeks, we had fully funded and fully whatever the monetized, the program in a way with people, with really good people. And it took, we were able to do 7, 3 weeks later, and 6 weeks later, we did all 13. All of that started with addition through discipleship. And then that moved to, okay, wow, this was multiplication, because we had no idea that those ladies had discipled so well. We just didn't know it. So it's the secret underneath the church is like, hey, if we can start here, it's the beginning of the tipping point. It's just the tipping point is always going to be, we need more leaders. You can do all the mission you want to. I'm telling you, it's not about money. It's about the number of leaders that you have. And so the more we multiply leaders, the more the multiplication of the gospel is going to keep going. So does that help at all? Mm-hmm. Was it even your question?
No, I think that was really helpful. So.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So this part 1, part 2 tie together. So would you say like when a church plants a church, just one, that would make it a level 4, and then when that church plants another church, that would mean the original church is level 5 church. Is that right?
So the experts that have that, like I've got some stuff in here that I can pull out and we can look at longer, but the principles are still the same, but what our goal should be is, hey, there need to be more church plants. We don't have to be rabid about it. We don't have to go after it. We have to be open to it. And so what happens, I could say even in some of the smaller church networks that I know of, like they got to 4 generations fast. And people were like, wait a minute, it's 20 years for a generation. Well, not in disciple world and not in church world. And actually, God's not limited. So if you do a really good job of leading people, in a span of like 2 years, you probably could have multiple churches. As a matter of fact, it was 3 years, 2 years of heavy disciple making. And then it was 3 years of harvest, and so we went from 2 churches to 7 churches in that time. And we didn't have a single plan on a dartboard that, hey, if we could see God do this, this is what we would want to see. And so it has a lot to do about openness and that hearing the voice, and even for a big community, not just a person. But another one?
Yeah. So one of because this gets tied with like church planting movements, like one of the pushbacks against it is like the speed at which you like on the fortune where it gets out of control. And like some might say like, hey, that's a bad idea because it's maybe unwise. You're not sure. Mm-hmm. What would you say to that? Yeah,
we so in the church that I'm a part of, they added three churches in the pandemic, and it overwhelmed our finance team. And so there needs to be like not just apostolic drive all the time. There needs to be a pace that is healthy. It doesn't do us any good to be worn out people all the time, like going after the next thing, 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 if we are worn out when we're leading people. Mm-hmm. So what we've got to figure out is the pace can't outpace your health. And it has a family. And I'm telling you this, I'm 56. I know I'm way the oldest person like in this whole building. But the reality of you cannot ever fall in love with the church more than you are loving and leading your family. And that means you have to lead yourself, and so there's definitely a pace, and if we're hurrying it up, we're probably going to screw it up. And if we start to screw it up, then the enemy comes in and says like, now you gave me what I need to really like totally blow it up, and so, but we learn things from that. Like God is in the middle of that. The enemy thinks he's doing something to us, and he's actually not doing things. He's growing us up, and he just can't figure that out. He can't undo himself, So is that helpful?
That's good. Thank you.
Well, guys, I'll pray for us, and we'll go eat some food. Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for our opportunity just to talk about meaty things. And when we talk about it, it's so organic. It's hard to think that The only reason a flower grows is because you created a seed, and you created dirt, and you created water, and you created even like the manure that feeds the growth. And Lord, we all have gone through that, and we are going to continue to go through it until we see your face and we get to see that it is true that the gospel moves to people through people. And it is true that you want to lead us. And it is true that you are intentional about using us. So Lord, empower and release us into thoughts that maybe are a little quirky and outside of the norm, so that we can get to all people so fast that we can be with you quicker. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys.